So, six city councilors are proposing a code of conduct for elected officials, boards, and commissions here in the city that fosters a workplace of dignity, respect, and tolerance. The timing of this draft resolution is right, is as Vice President of the City Council, Val Gilman, said yesterday, as of Wednesday, in a conversation that we had. Now, this code of conduct is really detailed, and it goes through a lot of kind of just the do's and do nots of local politics. And it's really quite interesting, Heather, because it really highlights how politicians should act. And a lot of this, Jamie O'Hare was saying yesterday, how, a lot of this is common sense, common knowledge. People should know how to act. And a lot of people do act in accordance with what this drafted code of conduct states. And so there's a lot of details in that, and it can be found both on the city's website and on our website for further details. But looking at it, the nuts and bolts of this proposed code of conduct really highlights that elected officials and board members are not to tolerate speech or behavior that is belligerent, disrespectful, threatening, abusive, and also keys in that the city has a zero tolerance for unlawful harassment and discrimination, as is described in the City of Gloucester's anti-harassment and discrimination prevention policy. So it's a lot, again, like I said before, a lot of the do's and do nots of local politics, and also notes that, the city councilors who signed on to this, would like elected officials and boards and commissioners, those who are elected and are appointed and reappointed, to sign on agreeing that they've read this, to notify that, that they agree with and they understand that they are to be held to this standard going forward. And it's interesting because Val Gilman, who really spearheaded this, she's been working on this for a long time. She attended a Massachusetts Municipality Association webinars back in January with John McCarthy. She then attended another one this March to really understand the best practices from both, at the state level, but also looking at different municipalities across the state and understanding, what are other places doing, and how can we kind of replicate those that are doing it well, so that we can really make sure that we are a governing body that not only is effective and efficient, but also respectful of each other, because we're not only engaging with the citizens, but we're also engaging with each other on a daily basis. And so what does that look like, and how do we do it in a uniform way that's, it encourages a lot of different personalities, but it also sticks to a system and sticks to that idea that, we need to work in a certain way to be able to get things done effectively, efficiently, and respectfully.
And particularly during this past year, which has been so stressful for leaders in cities and towns trying to manage the pandemic, I'm sure this municipality program was keen to address this issue. And did Val happen to mention any other communities that were instituting the code of conduct?
There was three that she had mentioned. I don't have them off the top of my head of what they were, and then she did name three, and she also included their code of conduct in the packet. And so really went, very detailed into understanding what these look like. And one of the speakers at one of the conferences that she went to kind of mentioned how there's never been a more pressing time in our history to discuss civil discourse amongst elected officials, which I think is a really important thing to note. So yeah, while I don't have those names there, they are available. And I think she had mentioned that, there was over 200 elected officials present at these webinars. So it's very evident that this is a hot topic here, not only in Gloucester, but across the state.
Right. And are there any ramifications with, misbehavior in regards to the code of conduct?
Yeah, so that's an interesting point, because I didn't realize this prior to doing this article, but there's been questions of, who holds who accountable, and if you're elected officials, is it just the residents, the voters, that hold you accountable, and what does that look like? And according to this draft, it states that any elected official or board member who are bystanders or witnesses of unprofessional behavior or hostile work behavior, are requested to do three things. One, to support the victim by letting the victim know he or she is not alone, affirming that the behavior is not acceptable, and helping identify resources for further follow-up. So there are actions of the bystanders, and then for those who might breach the code of conduct, the resolution states that the governing body could decide to publicly reprimand or censure the offender, and a violation could result in a removal from committee or board assignments by a council president or chair. Now, I asked the question, is this the same thing for elected officials? Because for boards and commissions, you can kind of, there's, a little bit of structure already in place of how you might be reprimanded. But what does it look like for those who have been elected by the officials? And Val had mentioned, for elected officials such as counselors or the mayor, include public censure or removal from a task force or board. And that typically the elected officials don't have the same discipline criteria as employees. But she did note that that doesn't negate the fact that, it's important to raise the bar in treating each other with dignity and respect. And I think those two words keep sticking out whenever I talk to counselors, is treating each other with dignity and respect in all cases, in all instances here within the city.
Well, I think it's just always great to have that written down and have, it be required reading for our city and municipal leaders.
Yeah.
So you have another story on one of my favorite subjects, which is beavers and draining the swamp.
Yeah.
So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so the Gloucester Department of Public Works is draining the wetlands near Goose Cove Reservoir for any of you who kind of walk by there, if on any trail walks. And they're doing that to save the integrity of the reservoir dams and protect the city's drinking water. The Goose Cove Reservoir holds a good majority of the city's drinking water used for firefighting and other different things here around the city. And those dams kind of keep it in place. But, as beaver activity has, spring has sprung, it has created quite the problem here in Gloucester, because as the dams, the beaver created dams are, put in place, they're creating a water level rise on the other side of the dam. So here's the dam and the water level. And if the water from the wetlands rises to the same amount, Department of Public Works Director Mike Hale had noted that compromises the dam's integrity, the one created by the city. And so they're needing to do this to bring the water levels on the adjacent side of the dam to the right level, to the normal levels it would be, so that they can kind of go forward and make sure that these things are put in place. And this was an order by the health department, an emergency order to get rid of these wetland dams and bring that water level down, noting that if the dams are the integrity of the dams are compromised, then that compromises the water, and then that can compromise, the city could be out of water. And so this was a fast acting, it's still in action. I asked Mike Hale, what's the timeline on this? And he says, it's dependent on a lot of things, but it's something that needs to happen right now. And so I think a lot of people are talking about that, but even more, I think the public comments are more about those that created the natural dams, the beavers, and what's going to happen to them. And so Mike Hale had noted that they're not going to be hunting down beavers throughout the woods looking for them and capturing them, but as they remove the wetland dams or drain the wetlands, if they do come across any beavers, then those beavers will be trapped, or they will be removed as they pose a threat to the surface water supplies. With that mandate, the city is able to seek a legal permit and a hire company to do that. But by state law, it does not allow the municipalities such as Gloucester to move beavers to an alternate location after they've been captured. So then it asks, what happens to the beavers if they're caught but they can't be relocated or released? What happens to them? And I asked Michael, so what happens? And his quote was, "What is done to the beavers is up to the trapper." So I guess you can fill in the lines there. And I realize there's a lot of concern potentially by residents of what that might look like, but that's kind of by state law. You can go onto the state websites to see those trapping regulations and understand that more. It's fascinating. It's something I don't think about beavers daily, but now I'm looking for them every single way. You see the stumps with the beaver action. It's so fascinating, but it's interesting to see when beaver communities and our local community collide, what does it look like? So that's the latest on that. And they're going to be working on that. They said they're going to be working and trying to get that work done quickly. But just know that if you are on the South Dam by Goose Cove Reservoir, you might see some of the DPW employees working over there.
And can I just ask quickly, how do they drain a swamp like that? Do you know?
That's a great question. I know there's something called beaver deceivers sometimes. I don't know. I know that he had noted to Val Gilman at one point, she had posted something on Facebook about how in some instances they might use beaver deceivers, which is when you can kind of put something in to help drain it, but not totally take down the wetland dam. But I don't quite know exactly what that might look. It might look like getting rid of the dams entirely, or the beaver created dams. But that's a good question.
We'll have to do some research.
Yeah.
So, and there's also a birthday party happening.
There is, and this one is very exciting and maybe a little bit different because of COVID. But Cape Ann Savings Bank is celebrating their 175th birthday this Thursday. So this Thursday, on April 15th, they are celebrating 175 years here in Cape Ann, and that's a huge milestone. I know that they're well known throughout the city. That community, of employees are tight. They are, I was able to speak with a group of them the other day, and you can just tell that they've worked together for so long and that they love what they do and they love the community and they want to give back. And so while the city is not able to have a huge party like they might want to, like they had at the 150th, Cape Ann Savings Bank is giving a total of $175,000 split evenly between 100 nonprofit organizations that they've given to over the past 2 years. So just really wanted to give back to the community. I understand this might not, be huge for some organizations, but it also might be huge for others, but just kind of a thank you. And they're not only saying thank you to the organizations, but also to the community. So by the time that you guys see this video, this will have passed, but on Thursday, they also are giving $10 off to any purchase at Bishko on Main Street. For a sandwich, anything you might want, but they're helping make it so anybody who walks in those doors or orders online might be able to get $10 off a sandwich that Thursday. So obviously that is passed by the time that you see this video, but it's really a sweet gesture. And you're probably wondering why Bishko, like why
Yeah,
right down the street from Cape Ann Savings Bank, but really why that? Well, funny enough is that location was at 51 Main Street was the original site for Cape Ann Savings Bank, which you would never know. But and I know most people who walk in those doors won't do this and can't do this, but if you go into the back of Bishko, walk past the counters, in the back there is a vault that they now use for meat slicing, but that used to be the original vault for the Cape Ann Savings Bank, which I think is so cool. Cool. And now, Lynn Silva of Bishko was saying, now we use it as a cutting room, and we got our cheeses and our vegetables and our meats. But at one point, that held, so valuable things for community members. And it's interesting because back then, there was only 48 depositors for a total of $1,355 in deposits. And now I believe that they are, over 30,000 depositors and almost $208 million in deposits. And they've, merged with Granite Savings Bank. So much has happened in 175 years. And I'm excited to see they're planning to celebrate, this milestone for the entire year. So they inform me, stay tuned on their website, capeannsavings.bank, to find out more about how they're celebrating with local organizations this year.
That's wonderful. Such a great story. Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for all the good news and interesting work you do. And we will see you next week.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.